Hello, it's Mike Rasmussen, CPA Straight Talk for Small Business. It is Thursday, October 29. We're running up on that election. This is a follow-up to the Secure Act video that I did, and it has to do with two topics: inherited retirement accounts, and then you can waive the RMD, that required minimum distribution. We talked a lot about that on the impact of the Secure Act on the RMD, but there was also a provision, a notice that came out that allowed participants who were affected by the RMD to actually waive it. So I'm going to go for tax year 2020. So I'm going to walk you through just a few examples. I will have those shown up on screen, but if you're driving, you can just listen in, and I'll read the high points, and then I'll follow up a little later with a YouTube video that you can go to on my channel at HiTechCPA. Okay, so let me jump to, so when I'm going to go through inherited retirement plan, and then options to the beneficiary, and then waive RMD 2020. Okay, all right, let me jump right in here. So right now there is the rules. And these rules are when the Secure Act passed in December of 19. So if you have turned or were affected by receiving RMDs before, and you turned 70 and a half before 12/31 of 19, these won't apply. But like it says right here, the Secure Act, which was December 20th, 2019, doesn't affect existing inherited accounts if the original owner died before or during 2019. Okay, so beneficiaries who inherited a retirement account before 2020 won't have to adjust distribution plans put in place. The options for beneficiaries going forward depend on who they are and when the original account owner dies or passes on. Okay, so here are the options. And then again, an inherited retirement account, how's that work? An individual passes on, dies, and has a traditional IRA, and just for simplistic sake, there are more, but a Roth IRA or a retirement account. Let's just say those three, and there are several more, but let's just focus on those three. Okay, each one of those three always have a designated beneficiary. In other words, in the case you pass on, who do those assets go to, and how does that individual, that beneficiary, treat those? What do you do with those? Okay, so I'm going to walk you through a few options here if you are one of those designated beneficiaries. So here it is. Disclaim the inherited retirement account, and what that means is it is available to everyone. Okay, and you're just not accepting the inheritance. So you allow the assets to pass on to an alternate beneficiary named by the original account holder, and then you have to do that. Option may be useful for those who don't need assets to avoid tax consequences of having additional income. And you have to make that choice within 9 months of the original owner's death and before taking possession of any assets. So the alternate beneficiary, there's a primary and an alternate, typically in a IRA, Roth, or a qualified retirement plan. Most plans designate a primary and an alternate. So what this is saying is that the primary wants and you're a primary beneficiary, and you want to disclaim that inherited retirement account. You have to do it before 9 months after the original owner's death, and then designate that to the alternate beneficiary, and then they step into these options. Okay. Take a lump sum different distribution. That's available obviously to everyone. You may take all the assets in account as a lump sum, so you're subject to the early withdrawal penalty of 10% if you're not age 59 and a half or older on the year that you take it. And of course you have to pay income tax on the full amount that's distributed. That's a lump sum. Okay. And let's see, they describe what an eligible beneficiary is: surviving spouses, minor children of the deceased, disabled individuals, chronically ill individuals and individuals not more than 10 years younger than the deceased, for instance, a sibling. Okay. Option number 3, transfer the funds into your own IRA. That's a surviving spouse. That's a typical rollover. Okay, so the rules, subsequent withdrawals are the same. For example, you want to withdraw the funds after 59.5, you must pay are not 59.5, you have to pay a 10% withdrawal. So that is a typical rollover. Number 4 there is take distributions over your life expectancy. So if you inherit an IRA, you can basically stretch that all the way through your life. If it depends on when you actually receive that, and it's a designated beneficiary. It says there's a limit to this rule for minor term. Assuming you don't need all the money once, you could transfer the funds into an inherited IRA held in your name, sometimes as a stretch. This enables you to take required minimum distributions based on your life expectancy, allowing the bulk of the money to potentially grow tax return. Okay, that's the one option. Although, let's say we use to calculate the amount of your RMDs. I'm going to get into the weeds of how this take distributions over your life on my YouTube channel, but that is an option. But obviously, you can see there are definitely some much more deeper than I want to talk about here during this show. Okay, and then number 5, distribute the assets within 10 years. This is interesting. So those who are not eligible designated beneficiaries that we talked about, so you just give it to somebody else, they're not part of that list. There's no annual RMD, but you must distribute those assets within 10 years. Let's see. And if you don't, you're subject to a 50% penalty. So, for example, you're a beneficiary. You become you're not an eligible designated beneficiary, but you become a beneficiary of this inherited retirement plan. Unrelated, a friend of yours, you inherited. You have to take the assets into income and distribute all those within 10 years. And if you don't do it within 10 years, you're subject to a 50% penalty. Okay? So one of the things that we're watching for right now, especially with the new, if there's going to be any changes to this, because this is something that is what's been talked about, is this is a great way, this is a method that the IRS and what the government is putting in place to not allow for permanent deferrals of estate taxes and assets in IRAs. And it is okay, you're allowed to put those in for your lifetime, but as you get closer to death and there soon after, we want the Congress is slowly putting in triggers to make sure that those assets become taxable, the appreciation on those assets. Okay, the one that's really talked about, if you think about this, is a Roth. Okay, if you are an eligible, not an ineligible, an eligible beneficiary, you are a spouse or a child, and you inherited a Roth IRA, that has to be, there's no annual, you must distribute the assets, but that amount that you take out is tax-free. Okay? All right. And if not, you're subject to, all of a sudden, it's subject to a 50% penalty. So I'm going to watch as I'm going to start working with, especially when you have, when you might have parents or you yourself, if you have a business and you're working towards how do you structure that, this is important to know who your primary and your alternate beneficiary and the options that you have. Okay. Then I want to jump up to the next topic is those are the options to the beneficiary, and then I want to waive the RMD, which is the required minimum distribution for 2020. So we talked about that yesterday when I was on, a couple days ago, and here it is. There was a notice, and let me just show you the notice real quick. Notice 2020 51. It's a waiver of 2020 required minimum distributions. Okay, permits rollovers of required minimum distributions and certain related payments, including an extension of the 60-day rollover period for certain distributions up to August 31 of 2020. So what that relates to, as if August up to August 31, 2020, we had the ability to basically elect to roll over any amounts that we had previously taken in 2020 and roll those into next year. Okay, that was after August 31, 2020. And again, I'm going to walk you through on my YouTube a little bit about this. And if you now on the waiver of them, you basically were allowed to, if you had taken RMDs before August 31, 2020, you were able to then put those in a 60-day rollover period that you had up until August 31. Overall, there's a waiver of the RMDs for 2020 for all of those. Okay, and then here's some sample plan amendments if you're an SMB with. Okay, all right. So there, I'm not going to now. Just to repeat, with RMDs, required minimum distributions, the Secure Act. If you turned at age 70 and a half, there are actuarial tables that require you to take out retirement plan assets, traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs, retirement plan, qualified retirement plan for the employee to distribute those out over your life expectancy based on these tables. And the Secure Act basically said in 2020, if you turn 70 and a half in 2020, you were able to defer that out to your 72, which would be 2022. Okay, so that's what the Secure Act did. So that's what we're talking about. It's a required minimum distributions of a traditional IRA, a Roth IRA, individual retirement account, or a qualified plan that you're participating in. One little caveat that is you do have to qualify, or are you subject to the RMD rules? And one is, even though you may have turned 72 and you're still working, you do not have to start those RMDs until you finish, until you cease employment. Okay, that's it. I'm going to create a YouTube channel. I'm going to create a YouTube video on these two topics, which is an inherited retirement plan and the difference between a primary and an alternate beneficiary. And then just keep in the back of your mind, here's what you keep on. Do I know somebody that turned 70 and a half in 2020, or did I? And if I did and I started taking required minimum distributions, hopefully you abided by this notice 2020-51 before August 31st. If you didn't, send me an email at mike@HiTechCPA.com and I will tell you the details of that if you already haven't been told about those. But regardless, you're able to waive any future for the year. And also, just keep in the back of your mind, if you yourself or you know somebody that's turning 72, that's the trigger date for complying with the RMD rules out of qualified plans, which are the traditional IRAs, the Roth IRAs, or qualified plans. Okay?